Welcome to the Money and Flow podcast, where avocado toast and stocks meet. Did you know that women and women of color don't talk that much about money? And did you also know that the health and wellness community is a $600 billion business? And did you also know that women aren't in the forefront when it comes to decision making with our health and wealth? We're here to change that. This is the first podcast that focuses on wellness and money. This podcast is targeted for women and women of color, specifically in their 20s and 30s. And without further ado, your host, Eugenie George. Hey, welcome to the Money and Flow podcast. I'm your host, Eugenie George. Super excited that you're here because it's Black History Month. So that means we are celebrating Black women. We're celebrating our money mysteries and how we can tap into that. Last week, we had a episode that we talked about unlocking your Madam C.J. Walker's money story and how our ancestry is a very important part to our historical context and how we are, particularly with Black. Without further ado, I want to introduce y'all to Kayla Lacy. And you can follow her on Instagram, which is Bend It Like Lacy. And she also has therapy for marginalized groups, which is called The Well. Kayla Lacy is an amazing person. And we kind of just uncover her story, her money story, and then also her mental health story and how all of these things tie together. There's a lot of history. We laugh a lot. So I don't want to keep us waiting. Here's the thing. I'm on the Twitter. We're also on the IG. Please give us a shout out because we love to see what y'all are talking about, what you're doing when it comes to your money and health. Just don't hesitate. Just stop by and say hello. Our IG is Money and Flow Podcast. And then our Twitter is Money and Flow Pod. Now, if you just want to chat with me personally, I'm Eugenie George _. Other than that, that's it. Enjoy the show.
Woo! Okay. Thanks so much for coming for the Black Girl Money Mysteries. I know you're going to be here for a while for this month, so I'm excited that you're here, Kayla.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, well, I look at your little Instagram and I'm like, I don't know how to do those flips or those back bends or, but I'm very impressed.
You don't have to. That's the good news.
oh, okay. That's just a you thing.
Yeah.
Oh, on a side note, I've been doing yoga for a long time and I'm like, how did you start bending it like Lacy? Like how did that happen?
You know what? That happened by it was during my study abroad. I was in school my last year, of college. And I started practicing yoga just as a workout almost. And from there, I then found that there was a whole community of yogis online and a community of Black yogis and people of color yogis online. And so interacting through Instagram is really what helped me to understand yoga was more than just asana. Like it was a whole way of being. And the type of things that people were talking about in terms of like taking care of yourself and body awareness and mental and spiritual awareness, it just spoke to me. So once I started, I just never stopped. And in the beginning especially, it was so physical. So I was bending it like Lacy because I was just trying to bend my ego pretty much.
Right.
But thankfully, it led me deeper into myself anyways. So that was the start of it, and I still feel like I'm always going to be a student. I'm learning new things about the practice and finding new ways to bend myself all the time. So
right, that's awesome. Because I've been doing yoga for like 10 years and I still can't do that stuff, so congrats. Um,
I think it's probably genetics for sure that plays a factor.
let's talk about your business story. So could you tell us how you even started your Instagram feed? I know you're interested in mental health. Could you walk the guests through that?
Yeah, so I had already been in school and college studying psychology anyway, so that was all. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I already knew that that was something that I was interested in, and really having the knowledge of psychology that I already had, and then starting a yoga practice, like I found for myself and how I was experiencing it almost immediately, like these go together. And that's what yoga is about. It's about union of the body, of the mind, and, you know, yourself, your spirit. So from there, I really was inspired to basically go into therapy, which I felt like when I thought about it, I was already doing anyways, like very naturally. I've always kind of been the person in my circle who folks felt that they could trust and could talk to and be vulnerable with. So I decided to pursue therapy so that I could really do that in a professional capacity and really know what I was doing, so that if I'm being led to this anyways, like let me do it with as much intention as possible. And so as I entered grad school, I just continued to find all of the ways that yoga and mental health went together. And moving from also my personal experience of being a Black queer woman, how like considering our social traumas and experiences like impact all of that too. So that's really why um yoga, mental health, and holistic wellness in general for marginalized communities is so important to me. So the Well is my platform that I use to provide those different events and resources and stuff for marginalized folks, and then also sometimes for like allied communities as well, because we do a lot of education on how to show up for marginalized communities as well.
Right.
So yeah, it thankfully it all just kind of goes together.
Right. But it's crazy because I don't think people recognize how it's similar, right?
Yeah.
I growing up, my family grew up from the church. My family's from the
Mhm.
South. Like,
Yes,
I grew up
same.
yeah, even though my family's from Louisiana, or both
Mm,
sides of my family are from Louisiana. When I went out to California, like heck of people that I knew were going to therapy and like trying to
mhm.
figure things out. And it
Yeah.
was always, well, you shouldn't go to therapy. Black people don't go to therapy. And I think, what was because I know you're in school studying it. Is it the Tuskegee Experiment? That,
Mhm.
okay. So could you tell the audience about that? Because some folks know about it, but that's like a core reason why African Americans don't go to get therapy.
Yeah, yeah. So oh my gosh, the Tuskegee experiment was when a group, in short, because it's a more detailed story, of course, but essentially they um the medical industry brought in Black people to test out, I think it was like syphilis medication, or it might have literally been a syphilis strain, and injected it into their bodies. And there are so many other different ways historically and in the present that the healthcare and medical industry and a lot of wellness spaces have just actually been some of the most like violent and harm producing spaces for Black
Mm-hmm.
folks. So having um resources, people, and spaces that are moving with intention of not adding to the trauma is so
Mm-hmm.
important, because it's not even like a thing of the past the way that I think folks think that it is. Like, sterilization of Black women is very real. The intergenerational trauma that you see in Black folks is very real. The different, like, that means like the family dynamics and belief and understanding. Like, that's what that is, right?
Right.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
the fear of like the medical industry, the fear of police and things like that, like that's that's generational trauma. Like, you learned
Right.
that from people before you, who learned that from people before you. These are not people and spaces we can trust. So anyways, don't get me started because I can get real.
Look, I don't even care because at this point, like, I wrote a book, and so now I'm just like, shots fired, clank, 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 clank. It's just like at a certain point, first of all, if you don't have your mental health, you are not capable of completely functioning as a person, as a human being. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. Like, if you're diagnosed with something, that it's a bad thing. It is a way to receive access or receive help. But that being said, particularly with the Black community, when we talk about intergenerational trauma, not only does that affect us, there are so many pieces to the puzzle that we don't realize that is affecting us now. So I used to say that, actually I did this on my Instagram story where I was telling people about this idea that you need to be humble. And a lot of the things that are like, you need to be humble are based off of spirituality, but there was this old term in the South that used to say, a whistling lady and a crowing hen never have a good end. And they used to say that to anytime I would whistle, everyone would tell me that, like, a whistling lady and a crowing hen never have a good end. And you're like 7, you're like, what the heck? And second of all, I would hear kids that were not Black whistling, and I was like, oh no, you can't whistle. This is like taboo.
Right. Yeah.
Come to find out, this is really crazy. Like, when I figured out that term, come to find out that it's actually an Irish saying. And because a lot of Irish people and Black folks, because Irish people used to be considered to be of the lower class back in the late 1800s, early 1900s,
right?
And they were working side by side with each other. They would say that a maid, I think it was like a maid, a crow, and an unmarried woman or something like that, if they whistle, they never have a good end. So clearly people shortened it and made it and tailored it to Black folks. But it's the same exact thing. The thing that you say when we talk about like mindset, everyone's like, yeah, change your mindset. It's like, there are so many things that we have no control over. Right. And so it is important for us to look at that and try to figure out, okay, where are those problems?
Exactly.
So I feel like since we're on this topic of like being real and honest, especially with mental health, are you willing to share your mental health story with the guest, or at least parts of it?
Yeah, I really can, because we got a long history. I mean, we all do,
right?
Right. We have our story. So mine is that it really culminated around high school. I got put into a private high school. I grew up in San Diego, which is already a very white space in certain areas. And so I get put in this private high school, and it was really damaging just on so many different levels, of being the only Black face in the space most of the time. That was really hard. And it got to the point where I needed like immediate services because I was not doing well being in that environment. Like, I was very depressed. I was staying in my room all the time. When I would leave my room, I would be scared and nervous. It was at school, and then it was also just outside of school. Like, I don't know what about me just attracted all the racist haters, but it seemed like almost every time I was leaving home, I was getting called out of my name. I was getting spat at. Like, it was like, when I tell people details, they think I grew up in the South the way that I be talking about.
Right.
So anyways, that's really important to say that I learned very young. For me, there weren't many spaces where me being Black or me being a woman or me being queer wasn't important to like consider in terms of my safety, in terms of like how people were going to react and interact with me. That was always something that I had to be aware of. And so thankfully, through family and every ancestor, we got up there. I made it out and I went to college at UCI. And from there, I was able to find a community that really reflected like understanding that there was nothing shameful of being Black, of being queer, of being everything and all parts of you that you are. And that really helped me to understand myself in a new way, because I had never been in like a space of self-hate, but I did always feel like something about me was a problem. And that's actually something that I still to this day have to constantly kind of like process for myself, of this underlying fear of like I'm an issue for somebody because of some part of my identity. You know what I mean? So from there, Yaya found out yoga, found out mental health, found out all of this goes together, and the impact that yoga had on my mental health. And from there, it's just been a constant journey of really great highs and really low lows, and just finding out each time a little bit more about myself and about my strength and about what I need to feel safe and to feel joy and to feel secure. And it's a daily experience, truly, because everything changes. But being so in touch, having to be so in touch with who I am and how I'm feeling about a situation has proven to be really useful language, so that I can connect with other people who maybe don't always have the ability to express, this is what's happening to me and it doesn't feel good.
Since we're kind of just in this like mental health and wellness, you have a really large social media following, and I mean, there's no time of the essence, but how do you think having your social media following is helping other people with their mental health?
Oh wow, I don't think I've ever been asked that
Oh,
before.
we're about
Probably
to
because
go
I've
there.
never had a following before. How do I think it helps? I have a sense that it helps because of the conversations that I have with people through Instagram primarily. So I keep healthy boundaries, of course. I have times of the day where I'm accessible and that I'm not accessible, but having a person who's available just to respond back compassionately with some of the things that people share with me about their stories or things that they're going through or are feeling, or reaching out for resources and things like that. It's those actual genuine let's talk to each other moments that make me aware that the work that I'm putting out on Instagram is doing something. And the only benefit, or not the only benefit, but the benefit of the following is just being able to potentially reach more people who may need to see it. You know what I mean? So that's really how I see it, or being able to share what other people are doing, because obviously I can't take care of everyone. So if you're here, check out this person or this wellness event, or here, this resource is for free and you can use it anywhere. You can download it now. You know what I mean? So that's really what I see. So my social media platforms for is just so that I can have a way to send out as much accessible resources as possible to folks who may not otherwise know that it's available or have access to it where they're at.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned access, and that's for real, because I think, yes, in particular, if you live in a city, you can have you do have more access to things like mental health facilities and services.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, if one does not know, then one doesn't get the help that they need. I had started, if my dad actually, nobody in my family knows that I went to therapy, so I'm about to take it like nobody. And I had started going to therapy when I was 22, so 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Good age to
Oh,
start.
of course. Why not? Right?
Yeah.
I think, well, also, if somebody's in college, I mean, I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure I would say that most of the listeners are not of college age, but if somebody's 19 and is like, oh my gosh, I want to listen to this Money and Flow thing, it is cheaper to go to,
Yes,
it's like $10.
for
Well, you
real.
also did, like California, University of California, like the whole system is very affordable. So I'm always going to support them because that University of
Yeah.
California does pay attention to that stuff. So yeah, the first like 5 sessions were free. And then the next
Yes.
were like $10 each. You can't get any better than that.
You literally cannot. If you are a student, hello to anybody who's listening to this. If you
Right?
are a student, use those resources now, because let me tell you, there are more low cost and affordable options that are coming, but they can still be really challenging to find. So please use it while you have it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's just
mean,
my little PSA.
yes, even, I mean, grad school, you still can have
Mhm.
affordable services. I always plug in BetterHelp too, because BetterHelp and Talk Space are
Yeah.
both similar, but BetterHelp, if like, let's say you have issues with your finances, you can tell them the issue and they can give you a lower price.
Oh,
So
wow.
people don't know that. I'm telling people that. But
Right.
yeah,
I
if
didn't
you
know that. Thank you.
Yeah. So if like, let's say, you're in school and you ran out of your therapy session. So you go to BetterHelp, because BetterHelp and Talkspace are both like, it's like 180 a month,
Hmm.
or like it's between 130 to 180, which is
Gotcha.
very affordable when you're thinking about saving yourself in the
Right.
long term. Um,
A lot of other places will charge that for 1 hour private practice and stuff
yes. Yeah.
for the
And a
month.
lot of, also check your, healthcare, because
Yeah.
some healthcare providers will provide mental health services and then some will not. So I when I used to be a teacher, when I lived in Connecticut, they did have mental health, but it was also like a very good charter school. So they paid attention to mental health. But then
Mm-hmm.
I worked at a place that was like, I hate to say this, was all Black school,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't have no mental. I was like, what?
Because that's real. That is
Right?
real. Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
so I was very shocked. But yeah, going back to the being 22,
Mm-hmm.
um, oddly, because I dated someone who was a therapist. Don't ask me
Oh,
why,
aren't
but
we the best?
ooh, no, no. All y'all
That's
got
a
weird
whole other
stories.
podcast.
Y'all are like librarians. Librarians, they come off real quiet, and
Uh-huh.
they do, because I used to work in the library when I was in college. They come off real quiet, but then you find out they're like in roller derby, or they're like dating a
Read
drag
me.
racer or something crazy like that. And
Right.
they're like, like, oh, I don't know
No.
what y'all. But anyways, no, I'm not gonna diss mental health or therapist. But
All love.
he was just saying, like, he was like, look, you got to figure out what works. I'm not gonna help you,
Mm.
and you need to figure it out on your own. And maybe you need to go to therapy and go quietly. So I went quietly. I just didn't tell anybody that I was going. I
Mm-hmm.
used up all my little my like time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very helpful for me because
Great.
I didn't I think a lot of people, Black women in particular,
Mm-hmm.
want to be the strong woman and not be vulnerable when it comes to what's going on.
Right.
And I'm glad that you were able to ask for help, but I was just angry. I was just a very angry person
Mm-hmm.
in college. Like, I just was not a happy person. So going to therapy was really helpful for me because I was able to at least cry. Like, I remember just not crying,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's weird because everyone has the right to cry, but just like not crying is not okay.
Yeah.
So, and it took almost a year until I cried, until
Yeah.
I realized what the problem was. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do find, as with my therapy clients in particular, that giving permission to feel what's there, and that's with yoga too. Like that's essentially, I feel like, all that I really help folks do is to validate that you're allowed to feel and experience whatever is coming up, to be aware of it, and then to safely explore all that is, you know what I mean? But for a lot of, especially Black women, I do see that, like, a part of the work is just affirming that, like, it's okay to not be okay,
Mm-hmm.
and to feel what you're feeling, even if that means that you're mad, or if that means that you do need to cry, or that means that you need to really, like, laugh at people for a long time, whatever that is, you know what I mean? So, but I'm glad that you went to, and that you allowed yourself, right? Because even if you bring yourself to the space, if you sit in therapy or take the yoga class, if you're not ready, right, to sit and explore what's there, then that doesn't, you have to want the change. It's not just going to happen because you um necessarily just sit down. So I'm glad that you allowed yourself that time, because you said a year, so it takes time, right?
Yeah, and I think most people, the first therapist they have, they're like, look, I went to therapy, she didn't help me. Or like, I went to therapy, he didn't help me, whatever. I don't want to say issue. I think that the thing that most people want, it doesn't matter if it was black, white, red, yellow, brown, is to have an immediate fix. And it is an injustice to oneself to think that they're going to fix
Right.
something. How old are they? 20, let's say 25, 26. That means you have to understand 26 years of your life. It's a
Right.
layer, it's an onion.
Right.
Going back towards, I always have to bring it back to finance.
Yeah.
It is one of the most important things to figure out how to seek help.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean go to a therapist,
Yeah.
but the true cost of going to therapy is basically like going to college. If you're intentional with it, if you understand what the problems are, like if you're trying to learn the problems and not blame people, right? So I also know people that go to therapy and they just replay, he did this, she did this, I'm a victim, and that happens too. But for the folks that really want to try to change, knowing that takes a while, but it is worth the payments, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. It can be seen as an investment. And I can say outright, I know it's hard. Like, even when I was in school studying marriage and family therapy, I could not afford a therapist, like, period. I
Right.
literally could not afford myself to get the services. And thankfully, I found a therapist who offered sliding scale. So that's something that you can explore in looking for options. Are they able to accommodate to your income? But it is really hard. And even, like, all the things that we mentioned before of, like, being a student, right? That's a position of privilege if you're able to be in the safety net of the university. If you have healthcare, well, I know things are a little different now where it's a bit more accessible, but healthcare is still, even if you have it, it's still a really great thing if they offer quality mental health services, you know what I mean? And the finance of it is really why accessibility is so important to me, because it's not, I refuse to believe that my community just doesn't want to take care of themselves or just doesn't want to heal themselves, but it's uh again, generational, just lack of access to the knowledge or to the support system to make it happen, or to the services that are going to be able to provide what you need right? Because you can still get services that are not culturally compassionate, and you end up walking out of there even more irritated than how you went in, you know? So finances is really such a big part of it. And I think that's a real shame that it is such a deterrent for many of us.
It really is. And then also saying that you don't have the funds to pay for it, which for a lot of folks is still, I mean, we already talked earlier about how the wellness community has disenfranchised people based off of privilege, based off of race. It's very tricky. And I think there was this, I don't know if you read, there was this article that was talking about like white supremacy and wellness. Did you read this article? I'll put it in. I'll put it in the show notes and I'll email it. I mean, it was deep. Like, of course, this is crazy, but I'm never the person that's like, this is white supremacy. That's not really my thing. But
you're going to be today.
Well, because when you read it, you're like, oh, dang, they're right. Like, there's so many parts, in this author in particular was talking about how the wellness community is geared to white women, and why that's a problem and how that is problematic. It's interesting too, because being in the wellness space, a lot of times you are the only person of color. They'll be like you, or like you and someone that's Asian American. They'll be like you and someone that's Latinx. There's always just you and someone else, right? In a lot of these wellness, even mental health spaces, where you're like, I have to be the main person of everything. I have to speak for everybody, you know? You know, so that also is a lot. And there was this one, I had to take myself away from this Facebook group because they were primarily, it was a podcast. It's like a podcast Facebook group. And the podcast Facebook group was primarily white women. And they would always have issues with race, and they would like clap back anytime. I was like happy that they were angry when people said something that was wrong on the podcast. They would say like, this isn't right. Like, this is what, you know, but it's like, yeah, boo, but you're also only listening to a white podcast that is going to primarily have just white people. So for you to clap back at these people, that's not serving anybody justice. And like, I explained that to them. I was like, look, I know I'm one of the only Black people in this community. So if I'm one of the only Black people in this community, like when I listen to a podcast that is only with white people, when I listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast, when I listen to any podcast that is particularly with a white male or white female, I take what I need and erase the rest, because at the end of the day, they don't have the lens or the framework to be able to access everyone. Now, I can clap back at them eventually, or we can have a conversation about it, but that's an issue with, you know, allyship. If you're trying to be an ally and try to identify with privilege or lack thereof, you have to have, you can't just keep clapping back, because it's not gonna solve the problem either. So it's a whole bunch of stuff, especially the wellness space. Well, I don't know, like,
I know. Thankfully, there's more and more like disruptors and game changers that are really making moves. Like Therapy for Black Girls is such like an amazing gift to the world. So,
and she has a directory.
Yes, she has a directory of Black women therapists all across the U.S. So I send people to there all the time. And then even on Psychology Today, that's a bigger network. But you can search for particulars that you would like in your therapist, or maybe some preferences that you have. So maybe you want someone who is African American, or maybe you want someone who's well versed in LGBTQ diversity issues. And so that's a really useful resource as well, even though it's not Black owned and operated.
Oh, Psychology Today is still they're still acknowledging the problems Like that's a form of allyship that works.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
At least I can search for what I need.
At least, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's Therapy for Black Girls that has a directory. There is a Latinx resource too.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I have to look that up in the show, or I'll put it in the show notes, but they have a directory as well.
Yes, they do.
And
Also
then,
really
for a podcast, so we have the Therapy for Black Girls, and then there's also the Latinx therapy community, and she has her own podcast too. So yes, we are starting when it comes to Black and Brown. I mean, we need to see Asian, and we need to see Native American.
Definitely.
Okay, but we're making progress, and that to me, that's the best. When one person hears a podcast, then they're more likely to start one. I mean, that's how it starts. Because next thing you know, you're going to have your own podcast. It's like everybody it just starts like wildfire.
Yeah.
Because women of color, it's still less than, I want to say 6% of podcasters are like women of color or something small. Right. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
So get on my face with like, oh, you guys, everything's equal. It's like,
right.
And it's like,
it's even hard numbers like that where you're like, ooh, we got work.
Right.
Work
And it's so funny too, because it's like, I can't subscribe to everyone, but there's a Women of Color podcast Facebook group.
Awesome.
And it's like, yeah, I know. You forget, people are like, this is so wrong. How come I can't find something that has people of color? It's like, you're not lurking the right way, because there's so many. It's a search engine. You can type in like Black girls in Ohm, and you can type out. There are so many different pieces that you can type out to help you understand where people are.
And that's the beauty of really social media. Like, it has connected me with so many, like, it gets so specific. Whatever community you're looking for, I swear, if you look and lurk hard enough, you'll find them.
Right.
Yeah.
So we are wrapping up for our first conversation. Is there anything that you want to get out to the group? Do you want folks to follow you? Do you have any last words?
Any last words? I mean, I hope that wherever you are and whoever you are, that you are taking care of you. I think that's just something important to always hear, to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do want additional resources and events to help you take care of yourself, or to support that, I should say, then you can check out at The Well Healing on Instagram, and then myself personally is at Bend It Like Lacy, and I can also always send you resources if you need that as well.
Cool. We'll make sure we put all that stuff in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, and I'm going to chat with you next week. So
yes.